My puppy just sat down in the middle of the sidewalk and refused to move. He's 2 months old, a snow-white German Shepherd puppy with paws a size too hopeful for his body, and today he was supposed to learn left and right, heel and treat. But his leash went slack. His chest hit the concrete, his eyes fixed on the shadow under a bench the way a compass fixes north. I spoke his name once, twice, the way a man does when he's trying to sound patient and not worried. He didn't blink. He breathed in, small and careful, and crept forward like the ground itself might fracture under him. There was a lump under the bench. Not trash. Not a sweater someone forgot. Two pointed ears, black as midnight and shaking, rose out of a trembling ball of fur and bone. Little paws splayed flat. A narrow chest fluttered like a moth against a porch light. My pup lowered himself, belly to stone, and inched the last foot on his elbows until their noses touched. A soft whine drifted up, thin and breaking, the kind of sound that makes your ribs feel too tight for your heart. He nudged the dark nose with his own and then pressed his whole small body against the other, as if warmth could be braided and shared. I told myself there were a dozen reasons to keep walking. Work. Bills. The simple fact that I was already failing at leash manners. My hand gave the gentlest tug I could manage. He stayed. A second tug. He let out a sound I'd never heard from him. Not pain, not protest, just a plea that made me feel older than I am. The little shadow shuddered, tried to stand, failed, and collapsed back into itself. My pup tucked his chin over the tiny skull like a brave pup whose job was to keep the world from getting any closer. I crouched. I could see the hollows where food should have been, the dusty whiskers, the damp lashes clinging together. No collar. No tag, just a heartbeat skittering against my fingertip when I reached in. My own voice came out quieter than I meant it to. Okay, I said, though I wasn't sure to whom. Okay. Cars hissed by. A jogger glanced over and then away, the way people do when they're hoping someone else will do the seeing for them. My pup didn't look up. He didn't look at me at all. He just held that little stranger in place with the weight of his tiny certainty, as if leaving was the one trick he wasn't willing to learn. And that's when it hit me, plain and heavy. I wasn't teaching him anything today. He was teaching me. I looked at those two pups, white pressed to black, bone pressed to bone, and understood I'd stumbled across a choice I could pretend belonged to fate, or I could own with both hands. I had to decide whose life I'd just stepped into. I told myself it wasn't my problem, and then Frost looked at me. Work. Bills. The responsible version of me started listing them like a grocery receipt, neat and reasonable. Call a shelter, leave a note, someone will come, the world will keep turning. It sounded adult. It tasted empty. I gave the leash a careful tug. Frost let out a sound so quiet it felt private, and spread his tiny feet like a tripod against the concrete. Another inch of pull, and he folded low, pressing his chest to the ground as if he could anchor the earth itself. Under the bench, the little shadow lifted his head and tried to crawl toward us, elbows slipping, nails scraping, strength gone almost before it started. People flowed past, headphones on, eyes forward, the way water moves around a stone. No one stopped. No one even hesitated. For a full minute, it felt like the two of us were the only witnesses left on the planet. My pup refusing to leave, that trembling scrap refusing to be seen, and me stuck between the two only choices that mattered. I crouched again. The small body fit into my palms like a secret you're afraid to say out loud. Cold belly, light as a bird that hadn't learned to fly yet. He didn't flinch when I lifted him. He sighed. Frost rose with me, nose pressed to the tiny ribs, step for step. A loyal puppy glued to my leg, crowding my ankles like he could carry some of the weight if I let him. We started toward the nearest vet. No speeches, no promises. Just the rhythm of my breathing and the brittle tap of my shoes. Frost kept touching my elbow with his nose every few steps, checking, counting, refusing to let the distance stretch. I told myself I was only walking, not deciding anything. But each block asked the same question in a different voice, whether this street shadow would become a rescued puppy or a memory I'd regret. Halfway there, the little head against my wrist grew heavier. The shivers faded. Too much quiet, all at once. I shifted him higher, searched for breath against my fingers, and found only the thin hush of nothing moving. For the first time today, fear split me open. The doctor didn't even ask his name, because he didn't have one. They took him from my hands and ran the scanner along his neck, A soft beep, and then nothing. The kind of nothing that tells you a life isn't on any list. No collar, no tag. Under the fur, the skin was rubbed smooth in a ring where cheap rope must have lived too long. He didn't protest. He just watched the floor like it might tell him which way was safe. Blood. Stool. Fluids. Words I've signed before for other reasons. Dehydrated, the vet said. Parasites, yes, but no collapse of organs, no spinning red alarms. He needed warmth, food in teaspoons, and time in someone's arms who wouldn't set him down and walk out. Not a rescued puppy yet. Just a problem to be triaged. They offered the script people offer kindly when they can't promise anything. We can keep him here and contact the shelter. They'll evaluate, place him on a list, maybe find a foster. It sounded like a hallway with a lot of doors that never quite opened. They set us in an exam room with a metal kennel while they prepped meds. Frost wedged himself belly flat against the bars, nose through the gap, breath fogging the steel. The little shadow pressed back, rib to rib, as if a fence could be a blanket if two bodies agreed to make it one. My brave pup made a small noise, high and thin, and I felt it in the space between heartbeat and breath. A tech came to carry the dark pup for a line and a warm pack. Frost tried to follow, tiny feet skittering, leash catching the hinge. When the door shut, he let out a sound so fine and sharp the whole corridor turned their heads. I stood there with a clipboard and pen and a page that said, I could leave him in their care and they would do what they could. It looked official. It felt like quitting. The pen hovered. Somewhere past the wall, I heard Frost call again, soft and relentless, like a thread pulling through fabric. I stared at my own signature and knew I was seconds away from deciding whether that voice got answered. Sometimes your choice gets made for you by something that weighs 8 pounds. They'd already given me the reasonable speech. You've got kids, a new puppy, a full plate. This is a lot to take on. We can call the shelter and start the process. It was offered kindly. It felt like a soft way to set him gently on a conveyor belt. The door cracked, and Frost slipped through before the tech could stop him. He scooted between knees, belly low, and made a beeline for the kennel. Through the bars, he wrapped his little paws around the dark muzzle and held on, cheek pressed to cheek like a brave pup who had decided the world could wait until his friend came back. Something old moved in me. A room from when I was a kid. A bed with a dent where a dog didn't sleep anymore because someone said it was better that way. No drama, just the kind of quiet that makes air heavy. I looked down at the form that would make the decision easy and tore it once, then twice. My voice surprised me when it came out. Put him under my name. Tell me what to feed, how often, what pills, when to come back, what to watch for at night. The tech blinked, then pulled a new packet. Feeding chart, dewormer schedule, fluids note, a line about warmth and small victories. When they brought him back, he lifted his face to me for the first time. The eyes weren't pleading, they were measuring, trying to hold both fear and hope without dropping either. I slid a hand under his chest. Frost touched the other side like we were carrying one thing together. The vet watched us settle the little body into a blanket. Adaptation won't be easy, she said. There'll be backslides. Are you sure? I wanted to say yes and mean it. What I had was a heartbeat in my hands and a leash in the other, and a quiet that answered for me in a voice I barely recognized. I thought the kids would scream with joy. First, they went quiet. They were waiting for one puppy and a normal day. I stepped in with two. Frost reached the kitchen first, trotting on soft paws and then stopping dead so the little shadow could lean against him and not fall. We set the newcomer down by the water. He shoved his whole face into the bowl and drank like he was late for something that might not wait. He coughed, sputtered, tried again, tiny sides pumping, nose dripping, eyes never leaving Frost. Lily hovered behind a chair, fingers at her mouth. Connor stood with his hands in his pockets in a way that told me he didn't know where to put them. The little one looked too serious for 8 weeks old, like he'd learned too much about empty spaces. He shook, then pressed his shoulder into Frost's neck and stilled, one breath at a time as if safety could be borrowed. My loyal puppy leaned back into him without looking away, like he'd been practicing this all his life. We opened a can, scooped out teaspoons small and slow like the vet taught us. The dark nose flared. He ate fast, then stopped, then looked up to check if food disappears when you blink. It didn't. Frost nudged the bowl with his snout, pushed a toy close, made a clumsy little bow that said, "This is play, not a test." I swear the stranger's eyes flickered. Almost a smile, almost a memory of what puppies are supposed to be. We kept the house gentle. No loud drawers. No sudden applause for doing the right thing. Every victory was a quiet nod and a palm under a tiny chest so he could feel where the floor ended and someone's steadiness began. A rescued puppy doesn't believe in routine on the first day. When night came, we tried the sensible plan: beds apart, a foot of space, everyone resting. He lasted 3 heartbeats before the sound started, thin and aching, the kind that makes you look for a way to fix the air. He wouldn't be alone, not for a minute, not for a breath. So we started moving the furniture of our lives, one pillow at a time, to make a place where 2 small bodies could sleep pressed close as one. I didn't expect 2 puppies could break my heart with silence. We started the night with a sensible plan: 2 beds a foot apart, 2 bowls in sight. Cinder lasted 1 breath. His eyes went wide, he spun on tiny paws and bolted to the corner like the floor had tilted. A low sound rose from him, more tremor than threat, the kind of scared growl that says, "Please don't make me disappear." I slid the beds together. He still shook. So we dragged the rug and built one soft island big enough for both to forget the edges. Frost flopped first, a white comma. Cinder followed and pressed tight, rib to rib. He fell asleep with his paw on Frost's back and kept it there like a promise a brave pup makes and keeps. It stayed calm until a door somewhere slammed on a draft. Cinder froze and shot under the table as if the air could close on him. I didn't need the backstory to guess the shape of that memory. I lifted the cloth and waited until a small black nose touched my wrist and decided the present was stronger than the past. Connor whispered in the dark. Someone left him there, right? I let the quiet sit on my shoulders before I answered. Yes, someone left him. We dimmed the lights and softened our voices. I lay on the floor beside them as the house exhaled. A loyal puppy doesn't ask for much, just a heartbeat he can hear and a hand that doesn't vanish when the room goes quiet. He had both. Morning came in gray. Cinder didn't move. He stared at a point the rest of us couldn't see. No water or food, just that stillness a body chooses when it can't make sense of safety. Frost slid closer until their sides touched and refused, with all 2 months of him, to leave the line of contact a rescued puppy needs to step back into the day. He was still with us, but as if he'd slipped somewhere I couldn't reach. Cinder lay on the rug like a shadow that forgot how to move. Toys rolled past his paws and stopped. He didn't look. Every few minutes he lifted his nose, searched the air until it found Frost, and set it back down like a compass that only works when it touches home. Frost stretched beside him, cheek to cheek, not asking for play, not asking for praise, just breathing slow enough for 2. I called the vet and packed a towel. In the car, Cinder didn't whine. That was worse. At the desk, I asked for temperature, hydration, anything we could measure and fix. They listened, worked quiet, and read off small numbers that added up to a bigger truth. Mild fever, a little dehydration, stress pitched high enough to drown out appetite and trust. Sometimes they don't believe they've been kept, the vet said. Sometimes their bodies hold the last hour like it's still happening. On the table, Frost jumped up uninvited and pressed along Cinder's spine like a seam. He shook so hard his nails tapped the steel, but he didn't move away. I kept one hand on each chest and pretended I could steady them both by dividing myself evenly. A loyal puppy doesn't make speeches. He offers heat and the kind of presence you feel even with your eyes closed. The plan was simple because simple is what we could do. Small meals, warmth, hands, often. Quiet rooms and soft lights. Celebrate the tiny things. One bite, one sip, one glance that stayed a second longer than the last. I wrote it all down, even the parts you can't write. At home, we built a low world around the beds, water close, nightlight on, shoes tucked away so the hall stayed a friendly place. Cinder set his chin on the edge of the cushion and stared through it like it might answer back. Frost matched his breathing until it slowed, then slid a paw over him the way you cover something valuable without thinking. A rescued puppy doesn't learn safety from words. He learns it from what doesn't leave. I watched the clock refuse to hurry. The house tried to sleep and failed. Finally, I pulled a blanket down to the floor and stretched out beside them, shoulder to shoulder with the two lives I was trying not to fumble. Somewhere after midnight, with the dark pressed flat against the windows, the first real shift found us. Around 3 in the morning, I felt a weight on my chest. Not fear. Not a dream. Warmth. I opened my eyes to a small black face inches from mine, breath sweet and uncertain, paws tucked under like he was trying to keep himself from falling through me. Frost was curled against my shoulder, a white comma keeping me in the sentence. Cinder didn't flinch when I moved. He watched me the way a ship watches the horizon, calm only because it's still. Then, very carefully, he touched his tongue to my hand. Once. Twice. A question asked and answered in the same heartbeat. I didn't say anything clever. I just let him feel the steadiness he'd climbed up to find. Morning came softer than the ones before. I offered food the way we were taught, teaspoons, slow, a dish that didn't echo. He ate in little tries, stopping to check Frost, then going back like the world might still be there if he looked away. He drank without rushing. A rescued puppy learns routine in fragments and stitches them together when he's ready. We set a toy between them, not bright, not loud. Frost nudged it, then made that clumsy bow that announces play without demanding it. Cinder's ears twitched. He tapped the toy once with his paw and blinked like he'd surprised himself. A second tap, a tiny huff. No game yet, just the outline of one. Lily read to them in a whisper from the end of the couch, words moving past like a warm breeze. Connor rolled a softball across the rug and stopped it with his palm so it wouldn't bump too hard. Cinder lifted his head, tracked the slow roll, and reached. Not far. Enough to say I'm here. Enough to say with Frost I'm not just surviving. All day he practiced small braveries, standing in a doorway and choosing the room with us in it, letting a hand slip under his chest without tensing, falling asleep and waking without searching the corners first. A loyal puppy doesn't announce triumph. He finds your eyes and lets you see it. By evening, his chin was on my knee, his heartbeat steady against my palm. I looked at him and felt something settle into place that hadn't had a name yet. You made it through the fire, little one, I said, because some embers don't go cold. You're Cinder. If you give a name, it's not just a puppy anymore. It's family. Morning found us on the porch, soft light and 2 warm commas asleep against my leg. Both were still, 2 months old, 2 sides of the same story, each a German Shepherd puppy breathing in the same slow key. I stroked the darker one's ear and felt him lean into my palm like a door finding its frame. You lived through fire, little one, I said quietly, because some embers don't go cold. You're Cinder. We took a short walk after breakfast, nothing brave, just the kind that lets the day look at you and nod. Halfway down the block, he started to tremble. Heat rose under my hand. The world narrowed to a heartbeat and a forehead and the long space between one breath and the next. I carried him home and then straight to the vet with Frost pressed to my knee like a second shadow. They checked him fast. Numbers, charts, calm voices that never rushed. Reaction to vaccines, they said, layered on top of stress. Uncomfortable, but we're in front of it. Small sips, cool cloth, watchful eyes. A rescued puppy can backslide when his body tries to remember everything at once. In the waiting room, Frost cried low and steady and pawed at the exam door until a nurse smiled and waved him in. He hopped onto the bench and draped himself along Cinder's side like a little white blanket someone forgot to fold. Cinder let out a breath I didn't know he was holding. I felt my shoulders drop with his. On the drive back, the car hummed and the road slid under us like quiet water. Both heads found each other and stopped moving, nose to nose, asleep before the first turn. I watched the mirror and felt something shift from fear into a shape I dared to touch. Maybe they would stay. Maybe this was the start that sticks. And as the house drew close, I realized the next part wasn't about what they'd survived, but what they'd be brave enough to become together. At some point, I realized I didn't see Cinder as rescued anymore. I saw just a puppy. Weeks had a way of sanding the sharp edges down. Bones filled out. Coats found their shine. Breakfast was a routine instead of a negotiation, and sleep came without bargaining with the dark. They learned the language of chase. Frost would rocket forward and then check over his shoulder to make sure the game still included a shadow. Cinder would cut the corner and surprise him, ears up, mouth open in a clumsy grin that made the whole yard feel wider. A brave pup doesn't announce himself. He simply runs where fear used to live. We went back to the same park, the same bench, the same square of sidewalk that had stopped our day. No ghosts, just two small bodies shouldering the air like it had always belonged to them. They moved as a pair without trying, the way birds change direction mid-flight and pretend they never decided. Connor tripped over nothing and did the slow, surprised fall of a kid who forgot about knees. Before I could take a step, Cinder was there. Nose to cheek. Lick, pause, lick, until laughter knocked the sting out of the scrape. Frost circled once and bumped Connor's shoulder like a white exclamation point at the end of an okay. I stood back and watched a shape I knew settle into a different frame. Cinder wasn't a story about being saved anymore. He was the one doing the saving, did the step in small, ordinary ways that never make headlines. A rescued puppy becomes a reason to breathe easier. Sometimes that's the whole miracle. On the walk home, they trotted in sync, tails drawing the same slow rhythm, the kind that keeps time for a family without anyone noticing. Doors opened, bowls clinked. The house took their weight like it had been waiting for it. Night brought a quiet I didn't have to manage. No watchful staring, no checking corners. They curled up together, then drifted apart, then found each other again the way magnets do when nobody's watching. Around midnight, I noticed the hallway light spilling a thin line across the floor. Cinder padded over to the kids' room and turned one slow circle. He lay down by the door, not because he was afraid of being left, but because he wanted to be there if anyone woke and needed finding. Now, when I think about our family, I automatically count to 6. 2 bowls on the mat, 2 little name tags clinking when I wash them, 2 toy baskets that never seem full for long, but 1 big old rug for sleeping, because that's the only math that makes sense at night. They eat without hurrying, now. Noses down, tails slow, like they finally believe there will be more after this mouthful. No guarding, no gulping, just the kind of quiet that feels earned. I drove them to their checkup and tried not to hover while the scale blinked up numbers that made sense of the last few weeks. Hearts steady, bellies calm. The vet smiled the way people do when the ending is better than the beginning and said she doesn't often see a rescued puppy and a home puppy knit this tight. Frost pressed his shoulder into Cinder like he was agreeing in a language older than ours. I signed the next set of routine dates and folded the papers like they were lighter than the ones I almost signed the first day. Word traveled down the block faster than we did. Neighbors who had watched us pass with the careful pace of a family learning a new shape started stopping on purpose. Hands reached. Cinder stood easy, not glued to the ground, not counting exits, just steady beside Frost with his ears forward. Kids with sidewalk chalk offered a pat, and he leaned in, 1 polite inch, then another. A loyal puppy doesn't need an introduction when he stands where he belongs. Evenings have their own rhythm now. Feet on the coffee table I swore we'd keep clear, a show nobody watches. 2 warm shapes collapsing into a tangle of paws and ears that makes categories like ours and found sound foolish. When one shifts, the other follows without waking, like a tide turning in its sleep. I sit with a hand in the fur of whoever is closest and count breaths until the room forgets it ever had sharp corners. I used to think stories like this belonged to someone braver, someone with more time or more patience or a better plan. Turns out it belonged to a moment and a look and a leash that wouldn't move. Tomorrow I'm going to tell it out loud the whole way through to the ones who still doubt a small dog can change the temperature of a house. I'm going to tell them how 2 puppies learned to be halves of 1 home, and how the rest of us did too. All Frost did was refuse to leave. 1 leash, 2 tiny lives, a white nose pressed to a shaking black face, and a decision I thought belonged to me suddenly wasn't mine at all. 1 small insistence turned into a day at the clinic, into blankets and schedules, into a house that learned a new shape. He chose another small life, and then chose us to follow. I keep thinking about how easy it is for adults to step over what hurts when we're late or tired. Dogs won't. They pick each other. Sometimes they pick us too. That's what happened on that sidewalk and every morning since, when 2 warm shapes rise together and eat like the future is a sure thing. I'm not telling you this to look kind. I'm telling you because I almost kept walking. Because a brave pup showed me that staying is sometimes the only trick worth knowing. because the cost was real and the math of our days changed, and it still added up to better. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. They stand in the space between being seen and being saved. They teach the rest of us how to carry what's small and shivering without putting it down when the door closes. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's meds on a timer and praise for tiny victories and patience when the past walks into the room and needs to be walked back out again. It's the quiet relief of watching two heads touch and knowing you didn't miss the moment that mattered. If this story reached you, pass it on. Your share is a hand on a leash that won't move, a pause at the right bench, a look that doesn't slide away. Somewhere a little shadow is waiting for a set of eyes that won't blink. Let your repost be the thing that turns looking into keeping. Join our brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.